Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andy Rathman Noonan. I am the Executive Director of the National Science and Technology Medals Foundation. We're extremely excited to have you all here for STEM Spotlight with Dr. Mary Garcia-Cazarin. I'd like to first thank Dr. Garcia-Cazarin for being here to share her experiences and advice with you tonight, or this afternoon, apologies, and Sarah Williams, who will be leading the discussion. I'd also like to thank the National Science Foundation for their generous support that allows us to share events like this to you all. It is our mission to build diverse and inclusive STEM communities that are equitable and truly representative of our society. So where do we start? Well, it's in webinars just like this one, highlighting voices that are often left out of the conversation and creating spaces where students like yourselves can both learn from and relate to experts who share our goals for the future of STEM. What we hope to show through this conversation and all of our programming is that there isn't one way to build a STEM career, and there certainly isn't just one perfect path to success. But there are, at every turn, incredible role models and mentors that you can look to for advice and inspiration. We hope that this afternoon's conversation with Dr. Garcia-Cazarin serves as one such reflection point for you along your way. We invite you to join in tonight's conversation, and in doing so, help us create an inclusive and safe space for all. When using the chat or asking questions, please take a moment to reflect on how your language may be perceived by others here. Thank you for your contributions and for helping us create a respectful environment where everyone feels welcome to listen, share, and enjoy. One final note before we get started: if you have technical issues, please text Laura Charity. She's going to help you troubleshoot, and she's going to drop her phone number here in the chat now. Her contact information was also listed in the event email that was sent to you earlier today. Now, I'm going to turn it over to our featured expert, Dr. Garcia-Cazarin, and Sarah Williams to kick off the discussion. Thanks.
Welcome to the National Science and Technology Medals Foundation's STEM Spotlight Series, where we're meeting the top minds in STEM to learn more about their paths to success. I'm Sarah Williams, a science journalist, and chatting with me today is Mary Garcia-Cazarin. Garcia-Cazarin is a scientific advisor for the Tobacco Regulatory Science Program in the Office of Disease Prevention at the National Institutes of Health. She has a PhD in pharmacology and previously was a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow in the Office of Dietary Supplements. To our live audience today, the Zoom Q&A feature will be open as soon as we start this conversation. So go ahead and submit questions whenever you have them. And then in the second half of this event, we'll try to answer those questions and hear from any of you that want to talk directly with us over video. Thanks for joining me today, Dr. Garcia-Cazarin.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you everyone for attending this event. I'm very happy to be here. And the most exciting thing for me is to really hear from students, to hear the questions, to hear what is that you really want to know. So we welcome questions from the very beginning.
Great. Well, can you start out telling me about your background? How did you get interested in the policy side of pharmacology?
Yes. So actually, the whole story really begins in Veracruz, Mexico. Veracruz is in the Gulf of Mexico. I grew up about 3 blocks from the ocean, and I really never thought anything about it because that's what I saw every day. So I really did my studies there. I finished my college degree in chemistry at the Universidad Veracruzana, which is the public university in Veracruz. And I studied chemistry because actually of a high school teacher. She was the one who told me that I was good at chemistry. I had no idea. I was very confused in terms of what major to be or where to go or anything like that. And one day she's like, you should study chemistry. And I was like, okay, I will apply for the chemistry college. And so that's how I got into chemistry for my bachelor's. And then I always had this dream of going abroad just to maybe learn another language or just to see something else that I've never seen. And due to my family, I mean, they were extremely supportive on education, but they didn't have the resources to just send me abroad like that. So I just applied for a scholarship to come to the US to learn English. Actually, it wasn't even to study a master's degree or anything like that. And then I was very fortunate to get a scholarship, and that's how I came here to learn English. And from there, you guys can ask me more questions about it, but bottom line is I went into a master's program in biology, and one of my professors there is like, why don't you get a PhD? And I was like, okay, I will go apply for a PhD. And honestly, a lot of my path has been shaped 100% sometimes by scholarships, because again, I didn't have the money to pay for any of that. So I applied to several programs, and to be honest with you, pharmacology was the one who gave me the most money. At the University of Kentucky, they were also paying for my health insurance. And I was like, you know what, this is a good opportunity for me financially. And I like science. I just didn't know exactly what path of science to take. There's so many of them. And I thought pharmacology was a good field, especially with my chemistry background. So with the scholarship, I was able to get there. It was more complicated than that, but that's like the bottom line.
That's the short story. Okay.
Yeah.
So now you work for the Tobacco Regulatory Science Program at NIH. What does your job entail on a day-to-day basis? What kinds of challenges are you trying to solve?
So one thing that I had very clear when I was getting my PhD and during my postdoctoral years is that I actually, as a postdoctoral scholar, I was teaching at a college level, and I love teaching. Teaching is something I really like, but I didn't see myself actually becoming a professor at a university and actually have to have my own lab and writing grants. But I still wanted to have an impact and use my field for something else. So that's when I learned about this fellowship that brings PhD people to the Washington, D.C. area. And this is a whole process that you apply for and all of that. And I was lucky to be placed at the National Institutes of Health. And my initial placement really taught me that once you are a scientist, you're a scientist and you can apply to different fields. And my current job is actually I never thought this could exist. This is my dream job. It's a collaboration between FDA, the Food Drug Administration, and our program at the National Institutes of Health. And what we do is we provide scientists with money and with research questions to able to collect scientific evidence so that the Food and Drug Administration can use that evidence to regulate tobacco products. So I'm really working at the interface of policy and science. And it's really nice to be able to do that at a different capacity, not necessarily doing the actual research in the lab, but more thinking about the bigger picture. What are the research questions that we have to have on the table so that investigators can go ahead and do that research and then provide the evidence to the Food and Drug Administration.
Okay. Do you miss being in the lab at all and being the one doing that bench work, or has this really been a better fit for you?
I miss it sometimes, but I mainly miss it because I loved mentoring students. When I was a PhD student and a postdoc, my lab was only with undergrads actually, and we were a huge advocates of undergrads. Many professors think undergrads are only the ones who come and be helpers on the side and like wash the lab dishes and no, we always involved in the research, and we were able to publish some papers with undergrads. So I miss the interaction with undergrads, and that's why I love doing these events and many other mentoring events. But the job I have right now, it really better fits my personality and my big picture mind, and more of like, let me look at the big picture questions instead of concentrating my research in a small molecule, for example. So this definitely is better for my personality and my lifestyle.
Okay. Is there a particular project you're focused on right now or spending a lot of time thinking about that you could tell us more about?
Yeah, so in general, we have been very focused on electronic cigarettes. You guys probably have heard in the news a lot of issues with electronic cigarettes, and especially they're being used a lot by youth, and a lot of them are co-using nicotine with other things like marijuana and things like that, and causing a lot of health effects. So the FDA and the Center for Tobacco Products and us, we've been working hard to try to better understand what are the health effects of these electronic cigarettes. The word's still out there whether this is a better choice or not than cigarettes. This is something that we don't have an answer yet. There are other projects that are more that I cannot really discuss a lot, but in general, we really deal with a lot of research that has to do with all different kinds of tobacco products. And the bottom line is to be able to create scientific evidence for FDA and Center for Tobacco Products. So when they try to regulate tobacco products, they have that science to back them up.
Okay. You just answered my next question a little bit, but to kind of play devil's advocate, I think a lot of people might imagine there's not much research left to be done related to tobacco. You know, we know the harms and there are a handful of fairly effective cessation methods. What are the kind of the big questions? Why is this field still important to do research in?
So believe it or not, there are still, in terms of nicotine per se and tobacco per se as the plant, yeah, we know a lot, and the field has advanced a lot. But as you can imagine, the industry is always ahead, right? There's always thinking about what is the next product to put in the market for use. So one of the purpose of industry, and I'm not saying I don't know because I don't work in industry, but my personal opinion is they're always creating ways to come out with a new product. And more importantly, they're always trying to get youth using these products. Why? Because we know the brain's still developing in young people. So if you get people addicted to nicotine or other, in different forms of tobacco products, they know they will have a user for many years to come. So the industry is always ahead. When it's not electronic cigarettes, it'd be, hookah right now, it's very big, especially in college campuses, in hookah bars, people go and smoke these hookahs. So even though we know a lot about nicotine per se as a drug, the industry is always coming up with new tobacco products in order to get basically people addicted to these products. So we need to be involved. We need to be answering those questions and inform the public on the health effects of these tobacco products.
Mm-hmm. So what's it like to work for the federal government? For any of our students watching who are trying to figure out their career path, is this an avenue you'd recommend? Do you have tools to really make a difference, or do you feel like there are a lot of regulatory hurdles in your job?
So I know a lot of people, and when I was new into this, I also had a little bit of questions in terms of is it people always kind of talk bad sometimes about government, like, oh, this is a government job or it's a government. But I have to tell you, the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, the mission, they're always mission driven. And the main goal of the NIH is to really better off the health of Americans. And not just Americans, but all the research that it's done travels around the world. It's used by other countries as well. So my experience at the NIH is people care. Once you're a scientist, you are a scientist. You are using that capacity. There are many different ways to have a place at the table regarding science. And one thing I really love about the NIH, again, I cannot speak for other agencies, is we mainly outside of politics. I think the NIH is one of the few agencies that always have both parties support. They always get their funding. They're always trying to help them out to be able to better off the health of Americans. So I personally feel that we have a mission at the NIH, that we are supported, that they care about us as scientists working there. And in my opinion, it's a great place to work. Also, before I came to the NIH, people just talk about the NIH and you really don't know, but it's a huge place, thousands and thousands of people. The NIH is called for the whole institutes, but there are 27 of them. So once you are at the NIH, you can really have a whole career there, because you could have many different jobs at different institutes. The National Cancer Institute, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, for example. There are 27 of them where people can really have different type of roles during a career at the NIH.
Yeah, I'd have to imagine that some of the skills it takes to help advise policy at the NIH and to the FDA aren't things that you'd pick up in a pharmacology lab during graduate school. How have you honed your business and leadership skills?
Yeah, so that's a very good question that I think is very important for students now to figure that out, what I call soft skills, a lot of soft skills. Once you acquire your scientific knowledge, whatever major you decide to be, that is great. But I highly recommend right now, when you are in training, when you are in your undergrad, to get involved in, even if there are small roles of leadership in your campus, like organizing a chapter of a society, or being part of organizing a conference or a meeting or anything like that would actually help you. Because once you get to a certain level, everybody has knowledge, right? Everybody knows what they're talking about. Now it's a matter of building consensus, building people together to be able to achieve something. And that's very important thing I have experienced at the federal government. There is not just Mary Garcia doing this. It's a whole team of people doing something. So you gotta be able to build relationship, trusting relationships to bring people to the table, diplomacy, communication skills, that at the time of making a decision, you can have those conversations with people and be able to agree on something. Many of the things that happened at the NIH and other government agencies are through meetings, conference calls, emails. And so you gotta be able to have those communication skills to really get the message across and try to bring people together.
I have to imagine that as a woman and a member of a minority group in STEM, you have often been the only such voice in the room. How has that shaped your experience as a scientist and policy advisor?
So at the NIH, I have to be honest, even though sometimes I'm the only Hispanic female scientist in that room, people are very open. The NIH is a very international place. There are scientists from all over the place. So at my job, I also, my close team, we are a team of 6. We are all great. We are all women. We're extremely supportive of each other. If anything, what I have experienced with them is they always support me for everything I do, right? They always think the sky's the limit. We can accomplish anything we want. I have encountered a couple of questions here and there, not necessarily from my media team, but from outside, where they ask me, if I feel comfortable writing in English, or, how do I feel about that? And my answer is like, I not only can write in English, but I can also write in Spanish if you would like me to do so. I wrote my dissertation in English. I published scientific papers in English. So I think I'm pretty comfortable doing that. So I try not to take it in a way that is so negative, even though it can come across that way, but mainly as, okay, yeah, I can answer that. I can tell you I'm comfortable writing in English and in Spanish. So sometimes you just have to teach people, you have to educate people. Sometimes they really don't know. Sometimes they're trying to be kind, they're trying to help you by not giving you something because maybe you won't feel good doing it. And unfortunately, that just comes with who you are and your background. And I think you just have to know how to answer sometimes, really.
Mm-hmm. Along those same lines, tackling race and gender inequalities is
Mm-hmm.
obviously one of the big issues of our time. And I know that in clinical trials in all sorts of fields, including tobacco-related research, researchers struggle to have equal representation from minority groups. Are there ways your office is trying to guide tobacco research to make sure it is inclusive and capturing differences between minority groups when it comes to tobacco attitudes and behaviors?
Yeah, so in general, the way the NIH works in terms of giving funding to investigators. So the general concept here is the NIH provides money, right, to investigators to answer research questions. Once you apply for funding, your grant, what is called the grant proposal, goes through a series of reviews, right? Where you have to explain if you are including women and minorities, why, if you're not, why. So I think the NIH has really trying to there are still gaps, no doubt about it. But we're definitely trying to move more into a field of having everybody included into these trials. I think the NIH is trying really hard to make an effort. You have sometimes to understand, depending of the location of an institution, it might not be feasible to include all the different groups, right? But you have to explain that. You have to explain, in my state, we don't have access to these subjects, right? So you have to explain why you're not included in it and why you're included in it. And the NIH is really trying to encourage investigators to really include minorities the same as males and females. For the longest times, we know a lot of clinical trials were only run in males, many years ago. So that was a big gap, big knowledge gap. And now they're really moving into asking investigators to really include everyone. But it is a process, definitely something the NIH has been focusing on, still work to do, but I think it's definitely getting much better than years ago.
Okay, that's great to hear. As well as being a scientist, you're a parent, and you've actually spoken on the Story Collider podcast about how to cope with this balance. I know that some of our listeners might be graduate students or young scientists trying to envision how parenthood will eventually mesh with their careers. Can you talk a little bit about how you've handled that work-life balance?
Yeah, so one thing that I talk about, and I know might be some news to some, I don't believe in the life-work balance. I don't believe that exists. I think there is a time for everything. Like right now, right here, I'm talking to you. If my child comes next to me and asks me a question, I will answer her question as well. So I have to learn that I can only do one thing at a time, you know? And so I realized that there are times for everything. Right now, I've been focusing on you guys, answering all your questions, be present. But if something else comes out, I have to switch my attention and then come back here. So I cannot basically be both places at the same time. And that's something that I learned over time, is like, if I have the opportunity to be focused on my work, I try to be focused on my work. If something comes out with family, I have to turn my head to my family and focus on that. So I just realized that that's just how it is. For me, a balance is very stressful, because balance to me means I have to have equal things in both hands. And for me, for my brain, my abilities, I cannot do that. So sometimes one takes priority over the other. Sometimes I can do, great work. I can work for 8 hours straight without any interruption. I'm like, okay, great. I got a lot of things done. Sometimes it's 2 hours and my daughter needs me and I have to turn my head, to pay attention to her. So by disconnecting my brain, I think that's have really helped me find some peace on the things that I can and I cannot do. The pandemic has really shown us that we have a struggle for so long to be our professional selves all the time. And the pandemic is showing that we are a complete human beings and we should bring our whole selves to the table. And my whole self is being a mother, being a professional, being a Hispanic female, being a Mexican female. I'm many different things, and I don't need to be hiding any of them. So that's just how I see it.
Okay. A lot of students struggle with figuring out their career path, what discipline to pursue, whether to go into industry or academia or something else. What's your best advice for students and young scientists who are in this place of, indecision? How can they figure out what to do?
So that's a huge question. And, that happened to me exactly. I'm the first person in my family who has gotten a PhD. So it's not like I could turn to my parents and be like, oh, can you advise me on what to do? I don't know. I knew I kind of wanted to be in science. That was kind of my general thing in my head. I have no idea what kind of science. I've never had a path. I never wrote down by age this and this, I will be working at the National Institutes of Health. That wasn't how my life worked out. It was many turns and curves, and it was mainly dictated again by scholarships and how could I financially be okay during my journey. So I would say give some grace to yourself. You don't have to know exactly what field do you want to be. There is a great thing here in the US that you can start with a major, and fortunately you can switch majors. In Mexico, it doesn't work like that. Once you apply, for example, when I applied to chemistry, you go to chemistry college for 4.5 years. You only focus on chemistry. There is no like general studies or, let me try a business class and maybe I switch to a business major. So I feel like you guys here have that great opportunity to explore. One great thing for the students is to look at some summer opportunities, internships. I know for many students, summer is really important to generate some money for the school year. But also keep in mind there are many places that give internships to college students where you can earn some money. Sometimes it's actually really good money, and then you can experience something completely new. And this starts giving you an idea of I kind of like that field, or I like this field better, or I did an internship and I hate it. So, you don't want to do that. And along the way, you get to know some people who, you can talk to, you can ask questions. What it's like to be an engineer, what it's like to be a doctor, what it's like to be, whatever field you're interested. So I think there are very few people in life who has a straight path where they know exactly what's going to happen every 5 years. I didn't have that. I kind of made the best out of my degrees, and at the end, it all kind of fit together. So don't be scared to try different things and just experience, different fields.
Yeah. But what are your goals for the future? Are you pretty content doing what you're doing right now, or do you have other things you'd like to do or branch out into?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I love my job. I love the team that I work for. But as you get older, you also start looking at other things, right? Do I want to make more money? Yes, I do, right? Do I want to obtain a leadership position, which I might be the director of a program? Yes. So that's something that eventually I'm working towards. I'm very content at my job. I'm really happy with my job. But at the same time, I feel like you should always be looking around. You should always explore what opportunities are out there. And luckily, I have a great relationship with my boss. And I always tell her, I'm going to apply for that position just to see if I make it to the interview and see. And she's very supportive. I have had a couple of interviews. Nothing has happened yet. But I'm the type of person that I'm always kind of keeping my eyes open, because I feel like why not to advance? Why not to have a better income for your family? So I'm always keeping my eyes open and see what comes next.
Where do you get your drive and dedication? What keeps you excited about going to work every day?
I think I used to hear this, and I used to get very annoyed with people when they say, "Oh, I love my job. Oh, this is my dream job." And I was like, how do people find that? Like, it took me many years to find that. But I really do. I love my job. I love my team. And when you are in that positive environment, it's easy to do a job. Like, I don't even think about where I'm going to retire. The only way I feel I can retire is when I cannot really think anymore, and that I'm not useful in my job. But I'm not counting my days, to be like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to retire, because I feel like I have a perfect, no balance, because that doesn't exist, but a combination of, a job that I like, a boss that I like. I live in a city that I like, Washington, D.C. So why not to keep this going? And even though my parents didn't have a PhD, my parents taught me working hard, it's really important. So and kind of try to make progress as you go. So I guess my drive comes from that, just to try to look into your next steps, if you can.
Great. Well, my last question for you is something we're asking everyone in this series. What are you reading, watching, or listening to right now, STEM related or not?
To be honest with you, I'm not reading, watching. I don't watch TV or Netflix or anything like that. I haven't read a book in a while. Right now, I'm trying to survive day to day, because my daughter is in school. I have to help her during the day. My husband is around too, and he, does his part too. But like, to me, it's a little bit stressful to see her being online all these hours, and like,
Sure.
so I do take a walk all by myself at 7:30 a.m. I just go alone, and I exercise. Exercise is my only form of. I do a lot of spinning right now. I got into spinning and I really like it, and some weight training. So that's my relief. I'm not really doing too much brain input right now. Mainly just trying to survive, taking it day to day, making sure I'm okay. My family is in Mexico. The COVID is really bad there. I already lost a couple of family members to COVID. So I'm just trying to make it through the day and keep it cool for now.
Okay, well, I love that honest answer. Well, thank you so much for chatting today. I would love to hear now from some of our student listeners. You can all submit written questions through the Zoom Q&A feature, or if anyone wants to ask a question themselves on video, you can use the raise hand feature and I will call on you. We do have one question already. Haley says, for the many undergraduates that lost the opportunity to get involved in research this year, what advice would you give to a novice but older students when competing for a lab position or applying to graduate school?
Yeah, so that is a very good question, and that's a tricky one, right? Because sometimes the hands-on experience cannot be replaced. But you have to remember, everybody this year is in a very similar situation in terms of hands-on experience. However, if you have a good peer, a good principal investigator, or a good professor, there are many things you can do in the background that are not necessarily at the bench. There is always, actually, a lot of scientists at the bench always regret not having a lot of time to reading journal articles, to really doing like a good review of what's going on in that specific field. So perhaps trying to find a position where you can contribute in that, you know, in that way, maybe not with your hands on right now, but it's like, how can I contribute to the research? Maybe you can help the principal investigator write a journal article. You know, maybe you can help them generate some figures that needed to be done with the data that's already been collected for the last year or the last couple of years. So I will still encourage you to try to talk to some labs, even if you cannot do a hands-on experience, to see how can you be part of the lab, even if you cannot be there.
Okay, great advice. And we have someone who wants to ask you a question directly. Chris, we are going to activate your audio and video.
Hi, Chris.
Let's see, I'm not sure it's working right now. Do you have your audio on, Chris?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, you're on now.
My question was, how did your experiences differ from going to school in Mexico and the US? And also, how did your undergraduate and graduate experiences differ?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. So I honestly, my very first experience coming to the US, I felt college was a little bit easier here. And only because, as I say, in Mexico, once you enter a field, it's very specialized. You know, I went to the chemistry college, so I took 4.5 years of all chemistry classes, physics, math. So, you know, here in college, you take a little bit more of like social studies, languages. So my first year as an exchange student that I came to learn English was like, oh, this is not too bad because I wasn't too heavy in one field. My chemistry course load in Mexico was extremely heavy. We had class in the morning and all the labs were in the evening. So I'd be in school 18 hours a day. So when I came here, having that extra time was like really great. But at the same time, being in that very rigorous chemistry college gave me kind of the studying skills that I needed. Like I knew how to study because I already done it. So I think that really helped me for my graduate school. Definitely my main challenge during my master at PhD was English because I was still learning and I had to now write in English and do everything in English. So, and I learned English kind of late in life when I came to the US. So I always had to have people like check my papers, you know, help me. I never really took English classes in terms of how to pronounce things. I'm just been copying sounds that people make. And so that's been my only main challenge, honestly, in terms of I never felt behind. I never felt, oh my gosh, I'm so behind compared to Mexico. I actually felt really well prepared for my master's degree and my PhD degree in terms of subject matter. And I had to work on the other skills that were mainly English.
Great. Someone else asks, what does a day in your life look like?
So right now it's a little bit chaos, as I told you, you know, because my daughter starts school at 9, so I try. She's 7, so she still needs help because she's a little kid. Set her up, and then I have a little standing desk that I'm standing right now, and I usually set it next to her, so I'm working. A lot of my job is done by emails and conference calls, so I do that a lot. There is no day that is the same, which is great. That's another thing I really like. We have conferences with colleagues from FDA, sometimes with NIH. Like right now, we're working on organizing a conference. So today we had calls about some abstracts that we're reviewing for the conference. It's a lot of science, but in a different way.
Okay. A question from Jenny. Is it very essential to have publications to get accepted to a good PhD program?
No, I will say it's not. When I applied for my master's, I definitely didn't have any publications from my undergrad. When I applied for my PhD, I had 2 publications that were still in process from my master's. So it's not like I had these papers ready to be presented. So it's definitely not. I think definitely for a PhD program, I recommend if you still have time just to get some experience, either in the lab, hands-on, or even right now outside of the lab, maybe doing something else for the investigator or for that particular field. So I don't think it also has to do a lot about your interview and those soft skills that I've been talking about, communication skills, leadership skills. And mainly what they are looking for is to endure your PhD, because sometimes PhD is not necessarily about how smart you are. It's about being there, holding on to endure the process and finish it.
Okay. An anonymous question. Is there an importance in what graduate school we go to? In order to get a high-level job, do we need to go to a great graduate school? Do you have coworkers from universities that are not Ivy League?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And when I have suffered from the imposter syndrome for a long time. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's basically kind of feeling that you're not good enough, for where you are. And when I applied to the Science Policy Fellowship in Washington, I was told that my chances were very small because I didn't come from a big school, that mainly everybody is from Yale, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, all basically East Coast and the big names on the West Coast. And I just was this person from the University of Kentucky. And I was like, okay, whatever, I'm gonna put my name in the hat, because I rather than say no, that already me assuming that it's never gonna happen. So, probably it does make an impression when you have this pedigree of awesome school names. But at the end of the day, I had to tell you, one of my colleagues is from Harvard right now. My boss is from Johns Hopkins. I'm from the University of Kentucky. We have another colleague from Howard University. And I don't feel any different. I don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so behind. I'm so low in the food chain. We're all colleagues. We're all equal. And don't let that, don't let that get in your head. Sometimes you gotta do what you have to do. In my case, I went to the school that gave me the most money, that were able to provide me a financial stability that I needed, even though they were not the big name schools, and it all worked out. I have zero debt from my degrees. At the end of the day, that was important to me.
Mm-hmm. A question from Leah. What would you say would make you stand out among other applicants pursuing a PhD?
I think having some experience will be great, even, short internships during the summer here and there. Some leadership skills, as I say, participate in something your college is organizing. Doesn't have to be anything big. Some chapter of a society, some conference participation. Show that you have, that you can start something, that you can initiate something. I don't think they're really looking for, of course, grades are important, but sometimes I think schools are moving more towards now looking at the whole person. What is the background? Sometimes they ask you to give a short presentation when you go for the interview. They're also looking for those soft skills. Do you want to do this and know that this is a long process, between 4 to 5 years, you have to dedicate your life. So it's more about that, showing that this is what you want to do, not necessarily the specific field of research, but more that you'll be able to get in, you'll be able to finish. Sometimes that's what they're looking for, honestly.
Okay. Amy asks, what do you remind yourself of or think of when things got tough during your career?
I'm sorry that it always comes back to money, but I had no backup plan. So either I had to do it or I had to do it. because there wasn't gonna be that check from my parents and be like, oh, sure, no problem. Here is money for paying your rent for the next 6 months, you know? So I have to say that that kept me going, because I was like, I have no plan B here. Like, it's, I either make it work or it's not gonna work. There is no plan B. So I don't want to sound like you know, person who just follow money, but I have to say, like, it was important to be able to stay afloat by myself completely. And so that was a big drive. I also felt, you know, later on, I felt the responsibility that if I had been away from home for so many years, to at least make it worth it, because I left home, you know, after college, and I never came back. And I miss a lot of things, you know. I have gave up a lot of things from being with family. So at the end of the day, I wanted something to be worth it from that time lost, to be invested into something else.
Okay. Another graduate school question. Which would you recommend, going for your PhD after undergraduate or after a master's program? What are the chances of getting into a PhD program after undergrad? Well, we just lost your audio, I think, Mary. We still can't hear you for some reason. Did your headphone jack maybe pop out?
Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're back.
It was my headphone.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat the PhD? So when I started my master's, I already saw that trend of many undergrads going directly to grad school. And I think that's perfectly fine. I don't think that is right or wrong. In my case, I did it as a confidence thing. I wanted to polish my English a little bit more. I wanted to know what it is to get a graduate degree, to see if I really wanted to commit myself for 5 more years. So I think for that experience was totally worth it. My boss's daughter, for example, just got into a PhD from undergrad, but she did work 2 years after undergrad in a lab just to get a feeling, you know, what she wanted to do. So I don't think there is a right or wrong. Many schools are taking students directly from undergrad. So it just depends on the school and yourself. You know, if you think you are kind of ready, what you want to call ready for that big step, it's like getting married, right, to that big step, you go for it. If you feel like, you know what, I really want to get some more experience and expertise in a particular field, you can do a master's degree.
Okay. Chris asks, what are some important skills you have learned from working at the NIH?
I think diplomacy is one of them, to build consensus. That's a huge one. To in science, sometimes, many times, we are used to be the first author in a publications, or I'm the person in charge in the lab. And in this kind of environment, it's a group environment. So if you are the type of person who wants to be the front of everything, it might be a hard environment for you, because now you are part of something bigger. It's not just you leading that. So I think that's a big lesson to learn, to build consensus, to be diplomatic, to work very well as a team, and to be open that things don't happen overnight. Because now you're part of a team, you had to wait for people consensus, for people answers. So that sometimes can frustrate people who want everything so fast.
Okay. An anonymous question, what would you advise Hispanic international students willing to work in the engineering industry but lack the experience due to limitations on their immigration status, like security clearance?
Yeah, that's, you know, I went through all these processes of immigration. I came here as a student, and I know right now it's even getting tougher, honestly, to apply for all these visas and all of that. In engineering, I'm not very familiar with engineering, but maybe after this or during the chat, my email can be put in the conversation. And if you want to contact me, maybe I can find some contacts for you. I know that could be a big hurdle to overcome with the visa restrictions and internship applications and all of that. But I belong to a bigger network, so maybe I can find somebody to talk to about this.
Okay. I can tell we have lots of undergraduates here thinking about graduate school. The next question from Angelica: how important is it to have experience in undergraduate research when one is applying to graduate school and fellowships? What are graduate school admission panels looking for in applicants?
Yeah, I think experience, it's important, but there are many ways to get that experience. You know, many students think that what experience means you really work 4 years in a lab, you have like 5 publications already, that, you know, you have to have all these different things ready and perfect. And I don't think that's what necessarily grad school is looking for. I think the experience is basically for your benefit, because you want to make sure being in the lab is something that you want to do for the next 4 to 5 years. So try to get what you can from the experiences that you can. I know it's easy for some, more difficult for others, depending of location, what labs are open and not. But also I think what grad school is looking for are, as I say before, those other soft skills, communication skills, leadership skills, showing that you're willing to put the work. I think that's more important, honestly. And of course, have some decent grades. And if you don't, explain why, you know, why this happened. There is sometimes a reason for all of this. So have a good personal statement that comes. Sometimes we don't want to talk about the challenging things in our lives. And sometimes that's what makes us apart from everybody else, you know, that despite the challenges, you're able to overcome them, and now you're ready to apply for something big like a PhD program. Have people reading your application materials. I know that's very scary because you think people are going to laugh or make fun of you or be like, oh my gosh, this application is so bad. And that's how you get through. You know, for my fellowship application after my PhD, I had like 10 people reading my statement, a lawyer, a doctor, like just different type of professions, be like, give me your opinion. And if they laugh, but they gave me their feedback, and I was able to correct, edit some of my application, which I think make a huge difference.
Yeah. Someone asks, what role does the tobacco industry play into your research? Do they have any sway on policy as a whole?
That's a very tricky question that I think that's probably better asked to somebody from a member of Congress, for example. I know the industry lobbies, you know, a lot, because that's part of their way of doing business. In terms of my or our program, really our job is mainly to provide FDA, Center for Tobacco Products, with the best scientific evidence out there. So when a new tobacco product comes out, or there is already a new tobacco product in the market, they're able to put some regulatory actions into place based on science.
Okay. Would you suggest joining the post-baccalaureate program at the NIH?
When, or can you repeat the question?
Would you suggest joining?
Oh, yes. I know it's a very competitive program for sure, because you can imagine it's the NIH and then basically one big place for a lot of institutions around the country, right? But I highly recommend to you go to the Office of Intramural Training and Education, Office of Intramural Training and Education at the NIH, and try to find the contacts for the people who manage these programs. Sometimes you gotta learn a little bit about the inside of the program, learn how to put a competitive application. You guys are so good at social media. Find some people that are doing this post-bac already at the NIH, contact them, ask them to mentor you. Like how did you get there? How did you start your application? Don't be shy. You guys know how to connect. I think that's very critical to what I call mentors for applications, where you get to know people who are doing it right now, even if you never met them. Maybe there is somebody from your university that have done it before. Contact them, have somebody guide you through the process, because sometimes there are little tricks here and there that you have to know.
Okay. I'll add on to that. It seems like, you know, you were really successful at finding scholarships and paid internships and things like that. Do you have any other tips for students on either specific programs to look at or, you know, ways to find those?
Yeah, so I mean, times have changed since I went to school,
Right.
but one thing you guys need to know is a lot of science degrees, masters or PhD, have funding in at least in science related fields. Not all the fields, like social work, for example, is different. Even public health, sometimes the colleges don't have as much funding. So always look into the schools and see how the funding happens there. It might be through teaching. It might be that you teach a lab or two per semester and then you get your tuition paid for. Like always try to do that research. But I can tell you for a lot of science degrees and PhDs, there is funding for students. Um, so always try to look for that as directly, how is my tuition going to pay? Don't assume that for a PhD, you have to come up with your own money. Most PhDs have some sorts of funding, either through teaching, either through helping teaching other labs, doing research in somebody's lab. There is ways to have that funding happening. And a lot of this happened when I was an international student and I was on a student visa. So even with that, as long as it happens in the campus, you can look for opportunities in that place.
Okay. And I think we have time for one more question. Someone is asking, what hardships have you endured in the lab? As a woman and minority, do you feel like there are extra barriers you've had to cross?
Um, I think there were, but to be honest with you, I was very naive back then, so I didn't know. I didn't realize it. It was later until I started doing some reflection on time that I was like maybe things happen, but I didn't pay attention to them. I don't know if that even sounds silly, but it's the truth. Like I was, of course, younger and naive, and I was really focusing on what I needed to get done, more than what others were thinking. Now, because I've been involved more in inclusion and diversity issues, I'm way more aware of microaggressions sometimes, daily microaggressions. But back then, I also have to say, a lot of universities are very international. And I always belong to the international office where, we meet a lot of international students. So in a way, I kind of created my own niche with other international students. So that's the people I hang out with. Those are the people who were my friends, and we were all on the same boat. And so we really didn't realize what was going on in the outside.
Okay. Well, I think that's all we have time for today, and I don't see any more questions. So another big thank you for spending time with us today. And thanks to all the students who joined us for being such great participants. We encourage everyone to fill out the post-event survey so we can improve these events for everyone in the future. And I hope everyone has a great night. Thank you.
And last thing, I just put my email in the chat box.
Okay,
In
great.
case any student wants to reach out to me independently of this, please feel free to do so.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.